was born in June of 1939 in rural Denton County. So there's no street name and no number, just out in the country. And my dad was a sharecropper. He worked for the man, and the man owned the property and had the crop, and he allowed us to sustain ourselves food-wise from his property. So we were some of the first sharecroppers in Denton, Texas. And the sharecropper meant we got part of the crop, and he'd sell part of the crop, and we got part of the crop. He got what he thought was a better job, and we moved out and moved into a rent house for I think a year and a half or something like that, and he began to work for the highway department. And so the rent house turned into a 17-year rent house with 4 rooms, no bathroom, no TV, no phone, no paved road, whatever. So it was very much rural Denton. So most of my younger years were spent in a very rural environment. We really didn't know we were poor until we started school and we started to see the way other kids dressed. So no, we just thought that was a normal life. I mean, that's all we ever knew. Our grandparents and my dad's family and my mother's family all had grown up in deep East Texas, and they were all farmers or sharecroppers. So it was kind of what we were about. I cannot recall a single time that we talked about, well, you'll be going to school soon. It was about, you'll be going to the pasture soon. I had 2 brothers. I had an older brother, 5 years older, and a younger brother, 2 years younger. My older brother and I were in conflict the majority of the time that we lived together. And some people in today's time, they'd call it bullying. In that day and time, they'd call him, I'm going to make him tough. I was a terrible student. I read my first book when I was in the 8th grade. I never read or wrote anything. And even then when I started to school, and other kids had been, some of them in kindergarten or some of them had been in different places and were doing things like reading and writing, and I was 0 on both. I excelled in doing chores at home, or I wouldn't go to school. And I excelled in athletics, and part of that was, you know, that's one thing we did do. We played baseball, and we didn't play football because my dad didn't know what football was, and he did not want me playing football because that football was after school, and that meant I was not going to be there in time to do my chores in the afternoon. So we made a deal that if I did the chores at night, we'd take a lantern out if the cow needed to be milked or if we need to slop the hogs or whatever we need to do, that I'd get that done after I got through. So he let me stay in football, and that was a good thing for both of us. But it was a challenge. We wrote a paper on what we were going to do after high school in my senior English, and I wrote that I was going to go to college and be a football coach. And I didn't say be a teacher, I said be a football coach. She read my paper to the class, and they all had a big laugh that I was going to go to college, that Don's going to go to college. Can y'all believe that? Don is going to go to college. So that just was one more layer in that stuff about, I'm going to prove to you, by golly, I can do it. And that may be the first time I ever realized that I was going to have to do some hard work to get to move on. At the end of my first semester of my senior year, a counselor called me to come down to her office. I didn't even know we had a counselor. Never talked to a counselor. I had no idea there was such thing as a counselor. And she said, Don, you know, you made a D- in typing. And she said, if you fail that second semester in typing, you're not going to graduate. And I said, really? She said, yeah. And she said, could I make a suggestion? I said, yeah. She said, what if I move you out of that typing class and then there's another class? And I said, well, what other class would that be? She said, how about woodshop? Yeah, that fits me just right. Give me some of that woodshop. So I moved over to woodshop and was able to graduate. And another interesting part about it, I was the class president. So I got to make the graduation made the presentation at the graduation from the class, the acknowledgement from the class. And so I know everybody out there said, I can't believe that idiot's up there doing that. I left Texas for the first time when I was 17 years old and drove my own car to Chicago, Illinois to see the Cubs and see Willie Mays and Ernie Banks play the day after I graduated from high school. It's in late June of 1957, after I'd graduated, and my football coach, my high school football coach, came to the house, and he said, well, I talked to Coach Mitchell, who's a football coach at University of North Texas State University at the time, and said, Coach Mitchell says he needs somebody to deep snap for the freshman team, and I told him you were a good one. Yeah, I sure am. And so he said, he'll give you your tuition and your books free if you'll come out there and play football as a freshman. We had a young man by the name of Abner Haynes, who was an All-American and All-Pro. In fact, Abner and Leon Haynes were the two first athletes, black athletes at North Texas. And they lived about half a mile from where I lived. So, and I had an old car, and so I'd go by and pick them up and take them to the UB. And it started out with Leon and Abner. It wound up being about 10 different guys that we just stacked them in there. But all of the African-American kids that lived in a boarding house off campus in Shacktown, 1957. So at the end of my freshman year, they cut me loose, and so now I've got to go start paying my $69 a semester tuition. Met this young lady from Amarillo that was an incoming freshman. Everybody on the football team was chasing her. Everybody in the business department was chasing her. So anyway, and I was chasing her. And that's when I decided that's going to be my wife right there. That's going to be not just my girlfriend, that's going to be my wife. And was able to sustain that, by the way. I graduated in January of 1962. She graduated in May of 1962. And we got married in August, and then started our professional career immediately here in Hurst, Euless Bedford, immediately after that. So she gets an interview, and she interviews, and Pat May hires her in the interview. And so she comes back and said, I've got a job, I'm signing a contract with HEB tomorrow, and said, you need to try to get a job in HEB. Well, I'd already made an application, and so they wouldn't talk to me, so I called and asked if I could come for an interview, and said, no, we've got them all filled up right now, we don't need you. So I didn't even get an interview, period, from any of the districts, zero. So she goes to work in HEB. I get me 2 or 3 odd jobs, and I enroll in 12 hours of graduate credit. 3 weeks after school started, HEB superintendent came to her classroom and said, is Elmer Don Brown your husband? And she said yes. And he said, I want to talk to him. He said, come on, little fella, let's go for a ride. So we go out and get in his car, drive by the pig farm, which was right across the street from the school. Now, he said, I understand that you're working on your master's degree in school administration. I said, yes, sir. He said, well, I'm going to build a school over here, and we're going to build another school over here, and we're going to do this over here. And said, if you come over here and work, I said, I need a coach, and I need a coach by Monday. If you come over and take that job, I'll see to it that you get an opportunity to move up in HEB. And I said, well, I can't do that. He said, sign this contract. And I signed the contract. Started at Euless Junior High School as an 8th grade science teacher. Well, actually, as an 9th grade science teacher and an 8th grade coach at Euless Junior High School in 1962. And my principal didn't want me. The athletic director didn't want me. The coach was Hoot Smith, was the athletic director, who you've heard about, I'm sure, already. And wound up being one of my mentors, by the way, after a few years. But anyway, so Hoot comes over and says, don't unpack your bag, you're not going to be here but 1 year. Said, I can't do anything about what Mr. Odell does. And my principal's A.J. Sales, and A.J. Sales says, nobody hires my teachers but me, and I can't, nothing I can do about it, so you're going to be here 1 year and you're going to be gone. So I already knew that this was going to be my one and done years as a teacher. I didn't know that at the time I signed the contract, but neither one of them even knew I was here. They didn't even know I'd signed a contract, didn't know I was reporting to work, didn't know anything about me at all. Didn't know my name, didn't know anything about me. So it was a little bit hectic. Everybody was good to me except the two people that mattered, my principal and my coach, my head coach. So spring comes around and we have spring training like we still do. And then on Monday of the last week, Coach Smith calls all the coaches in and says, I've hired somebody and he's going to come in and work with us all week and he's going to evaluate our program and he's going to evaluate our kids and he's going to evaluate every one of the coaches individually. So each one of you are going to get a grade, coaches. So that's all right, bring it on. So anyway, so we go after the game on Friday. We have a scrimmage on Friday night, which is the end of spring training. Then we go back to the school, and so this guy that came was Bum Phillips, the old Oiler coach, University of Houston coach, UT El Paso coach, high school Hall of Fame coach. So he was the guy that came to evaluate us. He said, Coach Smith asked me to evaluate everybody on the staff, and he said, I guess I need to start with the rookie. And so he pointed over there and said, that little fellow right there is the best coach in the house. From that day forward, I was God's gift to HEB. I mean, I went out of there like, you got to be kidding me. I'm the guy that's going to be fired tomorrow. And everything that came up, I got an opportunity to take a shot at it from then on. So I was assistant coach for the ninth grade. The next year I was the head 8th grade coach. The next year I was the head 9th grade coach. The next year I was the head JV coach at LD Bell. So that was my first year at LG Bell. I was the head JV coach. And then the year that I got out was the year that I was planning to be the varsity assistant, my first years of varsity. So I was Hurst Junior High assistant principal 1 year. The next year I became the Hurst Junior High principal. And I stayed at Hurst Junior High principal from 68 through 72, school years of 71, 72. 72, Harwood Junior High School opened, and I moved to Harwood and spent the 72, 73, 73, 74, 74, 75 school years. So the first 3 years of Harwood, I was the principal at Harwood Junior High. And then in 75, I moved from Harwood to Bell. And I was at Bell from 75 to 2001, 26 years. Principal. I never served as anything but principal at Bell. The town of Hurst was like the town of Euless and the town of Bedford. They were just tiny little burgs where a person, literally a person, had come to the area and settled and built a grocery store. And then other friends from, a lot of them came from Illinois, a lot of them came from Missouri. They came from different places to HEB. And now I'm talking about prior to Bell Textron or Bell, whatever it called. It was Bell Aircraft Industries, I believe at the time. Larry Bell gave the land for what is now the Keys School, Central Junior High and the Keys School. But Larry Bell gave the land if the three would come together in the school district. So thus HEB was born. By 62, they were beginning to put a lot of side streets on Pipeline Road. But old Hurst was basically about what's Highway 10 now. It used to be 183, but it was, it got pretty loaded with traffic from Dallas to Fort Worth. And that was way before the airport. So it wasn't the airport, it was just people commuting back and forth from Dallas to Fort Worth for jobs. But it was virtually nothing except the highway and a few stores. I mean, there really wasn't anything else left there except that. And then the Hurst School was right there on 183 as well. So then when Pipeline Road opened up, and I don't even know the facts for sure on that, but I understand it was built so that they could run a pipeline through there, and they built a road so they could get to the pipeline, and it became Pipeline Road. Now, my version of this story is Don Brown's version, so I can't prove this, but my version of the story is, of course, he had built the X-1 rocket plane, And because he had built the Edge-1 rocket plane, he began to get a lot of federal money because he was the early researcher in rocket jet propulsion. And he was able to buy that part of Hurst, what's called South Hurst, which is what we all know as the bottoms. He was able to buy that land for $8 an acre. And here's the other key point. You're talking about what happened to the population. Now think about this. This is immediately, the X-1 rocket plane was 47, and then this is now the early 50s. It's 51, 52. And all of these guys now are World War II. All these guys in World War II, all these engineers, all these pilots are out of a job. And you got Carswell Air Force Base over here, and you got Grand Prairie Naval Air Station over here, and all those guys are wondering, do I need to go back home to California or Boston or Georgia, or can I stay here? And so the boom became when he began to hire. The guys that had the skills that he was looking for were right here, within 30 miles of where he was going to build his plant. And so that gave a lot of impetus to Hurst growth that didn't occur until later on in Euless and Bedford. Now we've got to have side streets. Now we've got to have grocery stores. Now we've got to have service stations. We've got to have all of the fixings of what a community is about. We were in Euless in an apartment where we started out. We bought a tiny little house for $12,000, brick home, best home I'd ever been in my life. But anyway, it was $12,000. My payments were $97 a month. But anyway, that's another story. So anyway, and then when I came to Hurst Junior High as assistant principal, that's when we moved to Hurst, which would have been 67, 68. Bill and Dodie Souter they were it. And they were not just it for the city of Hurst. They were it for the HEB ISD, and they went beyond that. Ned Colvert was the first superintendent of HEB, and Ned was there from, I'm going to say, from 58 to 61. Ned was kind of a really, really nice guy that was kind of homespun and easygoing, and everything's going to be all right. New old Dale was, I'm taking charge, and it's going to be right because I'm going to make it right. Obviously, Hoot Smith was one of my mentors after I finally convinced him that I was a good guy and a good coach. Hoot taught me how to communicate with people. And, don't do anything till you communicate. He was BJ's mentor also. You know BJ, who I'm talking about. BJ Murray was the principal at Trinity for 27 years. During the same time I was principal at Bell, he was principal at Trinity most of those years, yeah. And so I guess we both had a common appreciation and respect for Hoot, that maybe they were the only people we'd listen to. Over the superintendent of the board or anybody else, we'd listen to Hoot. And so he'd get us together and say, now, little fellas, we better talk about this. We need to talk about this. When I landed at LD Bell, I thought, what on earth could be better than this place? And that was about Hurst, Euless, and Bedford. It was about the cities. It was about the community, the people that were living in Hurst, Euless, and Bedford. Obviously the school board, and whatever. But I just said, this has got to be the greatest. When my kids were at Bell, I had coached at Bell. I knew a lot of people, and it was just a natural deal. I mean, it was just something that I had dreamed about and never imagined that it would come that soon. So I was 27 years old. 28, I guess I was 28 years old. I do not eat lunch today. Even today, I quit eating lunch in 1980 something. And the reason I quit eating lunch is so I could see every kid in school. We had a 2-hour lunch block. We had 3 lunch periods, 2-hour block. And I could see every teacher and every kid in school every day. That was my goal. You build a climate where the kids feel a part of the school. 1984, we started a volunteer program at Bell called Teams. Together, everyone achieves more success. It's still there. It's still going. And we had 125 people, including me. I'm one of the 125 staff members, every one of us. Head coach, assistant principal, librarian, counselor, everybody, teacher, everybody. Everybody had a group. And we let the computer divide up who the kids were going to be in each grade in all of those 125 people. So nobody knew until the computer spit it out and said, here are your three sophomores, 3 juniors, and 3 seniors, or four, whatever. And then I became their adult advocate. Period. You got a problem? Don't go to your counselor. Don't go to your coach. You come to me. I can't tell you the number of kids that came to me, the principal, instead of going to their coach or their counselor or their teacher. And I'm your guy. I'm going to give you your schedule. If your schedule's not right, I'm going to help you fix it. I'm going to give you your report card. If your grades are not right, I'm going to help you fix it. And so, not only that, but they sat for twice a month for 45 minutes, just like you and I are sitting right now, around a table of about 8 or 9 or 10 or 12, as many as 12, with an adult who was their advocate. And we had a curriculum, and that curriculum was about smoking, drinking, getting pregnant, driver's license, grade point averages, getting in college. I mean, the whole smear of everything you could think about that kids are thinking about and don't know who to ask. And that was the curriculum, and we did that, and they're still doing it. I had girls come to me who were pregnant and said, you told me to come see you? And I said, you did the right thing. And he said, well, now what are we going to do? And I said, me and you are going to go see your folks. Oh, no, I can't tell my parents. You and I are going to go see your folks. I said, you take care of that baby. Me and Mama's going to take care of you getting out of school. Fast forward 11 years. I'm speaking at a principal's meeting in Decatur, Texas. And we're in a restaurant like we did. I go all around and talk, Anyway, so I'm speaking. And so these 2 young ladies, they're not young, but they're probably early 30s or whatever, I don't know. Anyway, so they're our waitresses. She asked the principal from Decatur, who was hosting the meeting, can I say something? It was one of those girls. And she tells the group about how was her advocate. She got pregnant, had the baby, graduated, saved her life. She used the word saved her life. The International Baccalaureate, America has generals and colonels and ombudsmen and the whole bit all over the world. And most of them do not want them to go to local schools where they're stationed. So International Baccalaureate, the genesis of that was that we would have American-style schools in those areas. And they would not only be schools, they would be the best schools. And so they began to pop up all over the world. In 95, 96, I was president of the National Secondary Principals Association, 46,000 members. And I traveled all over the United States and all over the world. So I came back and said, why are we not doing IB? Well, we were doing IB. We just didn't know about it in Texas yet. They were doing it up in Boston and New York. They were doing it. So I said, shoot, I want some of that. And basically what it is, it makes reading and writing the central focus of everything. Math, science, and it's not significantly different, but it's just reading and writing. So they go at a higher level. Texas Association of Secondary School Principals. And then the national is called the National Association of Secondary School Principals. The idea is to improve administrative capacity, period. So we have a conference in the summer, which I speak at nearly every year and have been for 20-something years. Anyway, and we have workshops around at the service centers around the deal. So we connect with the service centers. In my state position, I was what's called a state coordinator. So I was representing Texas in the national ranks. So I had a vote. So we vote for officers. So anyway, I go up there and I said, you know what, this looks like this might be fun. And so I come back and I go talk to Mr. Odell, and I said, you know, I've been state president and I've missed some school days. What would you think about me making a run at the national president? He said, really? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, I think it'd be great. I said, you wouldn't mess it up? And I said, no, sir, I would not mess it up. I promise I won't mess it up. I was president of the organization, and I made stuff happen when I was president of the organization. We wrote a book. We wrote a book on how to be a high school principal. Now, this is really going to sound arrogant. It's known more than anything because of me. I'm known all over the world. I know that sounds arrogant and obnoxious and rude and everything else. I'm known all over the world. You can go to any state in the United States and they will know about me and about Bell High School. What I do now is I'm primarily a principal coach. That's my title with our company. I'm a principal coach. And what I do is, if you are looking for a principal, I help you find one. If you have a principal that's not doing their job, you hire me and I'll fix him. If you have a principal that you decide you don't want anymore, you hire me and I'll fix it. I will help him find another job. You know, now I've written a book on the national level that people are using, and so I must be something special. 34 years as a principal, I didn't get fired, so I must do something right. I can't tell you the number of friends and people and that embraced us and embraced all those crazy things that Kay Baker and I tried to do and just jumped all over it. And I think we created a culture that said it doesn't matter who walks in the door. By golly, they're going to have a chance to have some miracles. And I had the opportunity just a few months ago, last month, to do the convocation at HEB. I don't know if you knew about that or what. But anyway, I gave the closing convocation. And that's what I talked about, was the fact that HEB has continued to be a first-class community, school district, and opportunity for kids, not just wealthy kids, but all kids. And that's the thing that I'm most proud of, and I think I had a big part of creating that kind of an atmosphere. I was a part of Hearst. I was a part of Hearst, where it was Optimist Club or where I was principal or where it was a church. I was in church, I was a deacon in the church for years. And I was well known in Hearst, period. I wanted my kids to go to Bell, and they did. And then after they left, of course, the last one graduated in '89, so I stayed 12 years after she graduated. I just love being here. That's all I can tell you. I just love being here.